Welcome to Mana's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box, or on the top right card. Volume 12. The Paladin of the Holy Kingdom. Both retaking the city and freeing its citizens were trivial before the power of the Sorcerer King. The attacking paladins and militiamen were virtually unhurt, and while some of the imprisoned residents had lost their lives in the chaos, it was a shockingly small amount. This outcome was only possible due to the Sorcerer King's presence, to the point where some people thought, if only we had handed everything to him from the start, we might not have needed to lose anyone. Everyone was smiling as Nia and the Sorcerer King walked down the street, whether they were rejoicing over being freed or shedding tears over a bowl of hot soup. Although they had been told that their freedom was thanks to the Sorcerer King's aid, once they saw the Sorcerer King moving around in person, the residents' eyes were filled with shock, confusion and aversion. But that could not be helped either. Of course, whether Nia could accept this state of affairs was a different matter entirely. While she wanted to do something in case the Sorcerer King was displeased, it would seem the man himself did not seem to mind. That being the case, it would be very rude of Nia to do something on her own. Nia addressed the back of the Sorcerer King, who was walking in front of her. "Your Majesty, where are you going now?" The Sorcerer King was looking at his palm, and he did not look back at Nia. "Yumu. I'm heading for this big building in the center of town. If that's an enemy base, I'll need to investigate it as soon as possible. The paladins are all tied up with tasks like freeing the captured residents, distributing food, treating the wounded, imprisoning the captured demihumans, and other things." Nia nodded slightly. "That building is quite large. If the paladins judged it to be a base, shouldn't they have already investigated it? While the Sorcerer King was the one who had conquered the city, the minor assorted tasks after that had been given to the citizen soldiers and the paladins to complete. In that case, surely they would have inspected the building that was the Sorcerer King's objective." The Sorcerer King stopped walking for a moment, and then looked intently at Nia. Then he shrugged and continued walking. Yumu. Actually, I posted my subordinates outside to make sure the paladins did not draw near. So I doubt they've checked it yet. Then what you said earlier. Ms. Baraja. I have told you many things until now, but it would be best if you considered matters on your own from time to time. For instance, the reason why we are the ones who are going to investigate the building. Yes, Your Majesty. The Sorcerer King looked at his palm again. Within it was an item once worn by that demihuman, the late Busser. The Sorcerer King was appraising the item as he walked, using the power of magic to carefully examine it. From what the Sorcerer King said, the sword was called Sand Shooter, the armor was known as Turtle Shell. The shield was named Lancer's Merit, the horn coverings were called Charge Without Hesitation, the rings were Ring of Second Eye and Ring of Running, while the cape was called the Mantle of Protection. There also seemed to be other magic items like the necklace and such. Although he said none of them possessed any impressive enchantments, the Sorcerer King still seemed quite happy about them. Nia shifted her eyes from the Sorcerer King's back to the ground, and then she did as the Sorcerer King said, which was to ponder the reason why the Sorcerer King had to personally investigate that building. However, she did not reach any answer which made her think, that's it. However, if she asked the Sorcerer King for the answer because of that, surely he would be speechless. The thought of the Sorcerer King she so respected thinking of her as useless and casting her aside was terrifying. While she desperately tried to find the answer, the aforementioned building had already appeared before her eyes. Two undead beings high race stood at the entrance to the building. As the Sorcerer King approached, they stepped aside to allow the Sorcerer King and Nia to pass. This seems to be the residence of the city's former lord. Nia was not too sure which noble had ruled the city. However, given the size of the city, he must have been more than a baron, but less than a count. Yes. Not even the undead have entered this place. We are the first to do so. Be careful. There might be more demihumans who have not yet been subdued. Your Majesty. Then. She hesitated over whether she should say, "You should stop," but the other Nia in her quietly said that it ought to be fine if it were the Sorcerer King. "I have to go here. This is the enemy headquarters, and it might be the lair of the demihuman's leader. Well, the only reason for that conclusion is because this building is very large, there might be a powerful being on par with Busser ahead of us. I want to neatly tie off all the loose ends in this city." After learning the answer to the question from just now, Nia suddenly pressed her head in realization. At the same time, gratitude flowed forth in her heart for the Sorcerer King's compassion. He didn't let the paladins get close because there might be powerful foes within. Unlike what he said just now, could it be that he wasn't willing to tell me about this because he felt embarrassed about fighting as someone else's shield? Well, Nia knew that thinking this way about the Sorcerer King was very rude. For some reason she felt the Sorcerer King was a little cute. "Well, do you understand?" The Sorcerer King looked at Nia's face as he asked that question. Nia nodded, and the Sorcerer King seemed happy as he replied, "Ah, that's good. He's actually happy that I can understand him. What a gentle and kind person he is. Your servant understands why your majesty does not wish to draw attention from others." Ah, exactly. Then, you understand, right? I don't wish to stand out too much. Understood. The Sorcerer King looked like he was pondering something. For some reason that also looked very adorable. Ah, let's go then. Yes. As a squire, she felt it was wrong to let the Sorcerer King walk out in front, but the Sorcerer King would not allow Nia to walk ahead of him. Nia looked with admiration at the back of the generous and magnanimous person before her. As his subordinate, watching a king lead from the front was truly a heartwarming sight. After passing through the wide entrance, Nia asked a question. "Where shall we begin our search? There doesn't seem to be any sign of others around." Your eyesight and hearing are both quite keen, Ms. Baraja, but how about your sense of smell? Frankly speaking, I'm not too confident in my sense of smell. However, I think I'm better than most in that field. As for taste, I think mine is just average. However, I've never tasted poison before, so I can't be poison taster or anything. Really now? Then, can you detect the smell of death and hatred? As he said death and hatred, his kingly aura of dominion coiled up around him. Death and hatred. This way. The Sorcerer King set off. There was no trace of hesitation in his footsteps. He walked as though he was familiar with this place and what lay ahead of him. Death and hatred, these things shouldn't have a smell, or could it be that His Majesty, who is undead, can make out such smells? That means whoever's making that smell is waiting here. Nia clutched the bow she had borrowed from the Sorcerer King. Depending on the circumstances, she would have to serve as the Sorcerer King's shield and step forward to fire her bow. Yet she had not been able to do anything during the battle with Busser. If she did not make herself more useful, there would be no reason for her to be here. They did not encounter any demihumans along the way, and before long, they came to a door that was about the same size as the one they had passed through earlier. It was made of steel and iron, and thus looked very sturdy. This was what looked like a prison door, in the middle of a regular noble's residence. The juxtaposition filled Nia with a powerful sense of foreboding. It felt like she had been thrown into an unfamiliar and spine-chilling place. It's inside here, you can stay outside if you want, you know. It was impossible for Nia to make that choice. After seeing Nia shake her head, the Sorcerer King shrugged and opened the door. The Sorcerer King's strength opened the iron door with ease. However, it was surprisingly thick, so it must have been specially made. The Sorcerer King entered the room. Oh no. I can't believe I actually let His Majesty walk into this unknown place first. I'm an idiot. Nia hurriedly entered the room as well. While the heavy door had given her some inkling of what to expect, the interior of the room felt strange. It gave her the impression of being a torture chamber, although she had only heard descriptions of those. For starters, there were no windows. There were sticks set into the wall which glowed with a faint red light. This was not a natural light, but created by magic. There was a table made of wood and 2 wooden chairs. Further inside was another door, also made of iron. The Sorcerer King stood in the center of the room, carefully surveying every corner of it. This was when Nia noticed something on the table. Your Majesty. This looks like a piece of paper, but what's that written on it? The piece of paper Nia picked up was covered in illegible characters. They were certainly not written in Holy Kingdom script. They seemed to be written in words from the demonic language. The Sorcerer King took out a monocle from a pocket. Perhaps he had noticed the surprised look on Nia's face, because he then proceeded to explain it. This is a magic item that can decipher written languages. That said, it drains a vast amount of mana. Ms. Baraja, do you know of any humans who can decipher these characters? With the ability to comprehend languages? Indeed. Or at least, someone who knows what these letters are. Also, any humans who have a talent which lets them decipher languages. My deepest apologies, I don't know about. Nia was simply a squire for the Paladin Order. She had not had the chance to come into contact with news about people like those. Granted, she had heard some rumors from her squire friends. For instance, my friend has a talent that lets him know many degrees hot water is. Of course, nobody knows the exact temperature, or my relative's a bull pilot who can walk 5 steps on water, but more than that, and he'll sink, and so on. Most of them were abilities which would make people sigh and fall silent. There was no information about people who possessed abilities which the Sorcerer King wanted to know about. Really now? What a shame. Do you think Captain Custodio would know? Surely the captain of the Paladin Order would have come into contact with all sorts of intelligence. However, Nia did not know what to think of Remedios. Would the captain really allocate her headspace to information? I am not sure about that either. However, I feel it would be better to ask the vice captain. Well, that's true. If I ask him. The Sorcerer King was probably stumbling over his words for the same reason Nia had. However, what do you intend to do if such a person does not exist? Ah, I did not intend anything. But if there was someone who could decipher the intelligence Jaldabaoth left behind, our future plans would change. No. This was an obvious question which she could have answered on her own if she had just thought a little, yet she needed the Sorcerer King to explain it to her. Nia was ashamed about asking such a foolish question without giving it any thought. If there's nobody who can translate this, then I'll just have to expend mana to decipher it. However, doing so would lead to a disadvantageous state where I would have to be more wary of Jaldabaoth. If I encountered Jaldabaoth after expending a great deal of mana, my only option would be to flee, although, this makes me quite curious. If it's just one piece of paper, then I shall read it. Will it be alright? Yes. I just need to pay more attention to my mana reserves. The Sorcerer King put on his monocle and looked at the paper. Although there were no visible signs of activation, it ought to have taken effect. The Sorcerer King looked like he was deciphering it now. That said, the Sorcerer King had no eyes, so it simply looked like he was reading it. After a short while, he took the monocle. It was a lot of mana after all. Nia had seen priests wobble around shakily after using a great deal of mana, but she saw no signs of that in the Sorcerer King. However, comparing the Sorcerer King to an average magic caster was the height of rudeness. It was probably because he had enormous stores of mana. As Nia contemplated this, the Sorcerer King approached the door further within and gently slid open the vision slit.